Carlos Sainz has finally decided. He's rejected Audi and Renault to join Williams when he leaves Ferrari. It's a huge blow for F1's big new manufacturer Audi, which has bought 100% of the Sauber team and will rebrand it fully in 2026, and signals just how far Renault's works team Alpine has fallen in the pecking order too. This has been the longest running saga in a wild 2025 driver market, as Sainz waited to see if he could land a top seat after being dropped by Ferrari for Lewis Hamilton. And with the doors closed at Red Bull and Mercedes, Sainz has had to suck it up and choose between F1's three worst teams in 2024, with Williams winning him over. Sainz has signed a multi-year deal for 2025, 2026 and beyond, according to Williams, where he will partner Alex Albon in what will be one of the best pairings on the grid for possibly one of the least competitive teams, at least in the short term. Sainz says he's convinced Williams has everything it needs to be successful in F1 again, and credited the solid leadership and convictions of team boss James Vowles and the Williams board as playing an important role in his decision. Vowles finally has his man and called this a strong statement of intent from both sides that underlines Williams' longer term trajectory, even if the on-track results suggest more stagnation. It was a punchy announcement from Williams, as Vowles declared people should be in no doubt about our ambition and momentum, adding, "We are here, we are serious, and we are investing in what it takes to return to the front of the grid." But there are many teams, including Sainz's other suitors, who could at least claim to offer the same. So what convinced Sainz that this was the project to be a part of over all others still available? Audi doesn't fail in motorsport. Its triumphs in sports cars, tin tops, rallying and even Formula E prove that. Yet the inability to convince Sainz to join its F1 project is a dire indictment of its prospects. The problem isn't simply that it didn't sell Sainz on the team. Had it lost him to Red Bull or Mercedes, Audi would have been at peace with that because those alternatives offered immediate results. But rejecting its overtures in favour of joining Williams would have set the alarm bells ringing in Ingolstadt and Hinwil had they not already sounded, and led to the management overhaul and the recruitment of ex-Ferrari team principal Mattia Binotto. That regime change might have had the power to change Sainz's mind, given he's an old ally of Binotto who originally signed him at Ferrari. The trouble is, it came too late, both in terms of a looming Williams deadline and the time it will take for Binotto to set his path and potentially convince Sainz that Audi is on the right track. The very fact Audi's outgoing F1 leader Andreas Seidel, another former team boss of Sainz, couldn't convince the Ferrari driver tells you how much work there is to do, because on paper Audi has huge advantages over Williams. It has its own in-house engine program, past and future leadership that Sainz knows well from his days at McLaren and Ferrari, and the might of one of the biggest car manufacturers in the world behind it. That shouldn't just tip the balance in Audi's favour, but tilt the field to near vertical. It's clear there is something missing at the team Audi is buying. There is ongoing investment in the facilities and a recruitment drive that's expanding the Sauber workforce, so it is a team in transition, and it has had a big eye on getting things right for 26 when it becomes Audi proper. But sharpening the here and now must not be neglected as part of the process of Audification, and despite having plenty of accomplished personnel and decent facilities, Sauber is still a blunt force. That's played a key role in Seidel being replaced and Binotto brought in. Sainz was given the hard sell by Seidel and spoke with Binotto as well, yet he's clearly not even close to convinced. Maybe he's wrong, he might have turned his back on the chance to be in a championship winning Audi a few years from now. But he's not prone to rash or ill-founded judgments and is well aware of the positives of joining a works team. This one just has too many downsides. Sainz's verdict is therefore damning for Audi. Even when he was faced with a driver market dilemma, Audi hasn't even convinced Sainz it's the least worst option. Enough Audi bashing, let's get stuck into another manufacturer, one with an even more baffling approach to F1. Alpine's big sell to Sainz was "we won't be a works team anymore." Confused? Fair enough. But basically Alpine wasn't really in contention until Sainz was told Renault was willing to get rid of its own engine and become a Mercedes customer instead. To explain, let's back up a second. Sainz wanted a long-term project, and with major new car and engine rules in 2026 on the horizon, that puts a lot of weight on choosing what's best for, you guessed it, the long term. The engine part of that equation is going to be massive. It's the first major change of the V6 turbo hybrid era, pushing the engine to a near 50-50 split between the internal combustion engine and electrical power. Williams, like McLaren, is gearing up for a long-term Mercedes customer future, having opted to stick with its current engine supplier for the new engine rule cycle. And the word on the street is, just like it was in 2014 at the start of these rules, Mercedes is looking in good shape. Sainz's desire to get a piece of that action was cemented when Flavio Briatore joined Alpine, convinced Renault CEO Luca De Meo the best strategy was to try to do a Mercedes deal, and that single-handedly revived discussions with Sainz. So it was specifically the shift from being a works team to being a Mercedes customer that made Alpine more appealing. That shows how much Sainz valued the engine when considering his options, as well as underlining how unconvincing this team was on its own. Alpine keeps talking a good game about how its Renault engine was looking for 2026, but that's easy to say if you plan on pulling the plug so nobody ever actually finds out. What Briatore's move did achieve was eliminate one of the potential clear Williams advantages over Alpine, which is great until it became clear it still wasn't enough for Alpine to get Sainz, which again says a lot. Frankly, Alpine only seemed to bluster its way into contention by promising quick short or medium term gains. There's potentially a really good team there, but it's being undermined by cack-handed Renault leadership. The Briatore strategy was probably exposed quite rapidly as having little substance and a huge chance of backfiring. And there is the fact that so many people in the paddock think that sooner or later this is all going to lead to Renault selling its team. And with the news last week that team boss Bruno Famin would leave in August, the Sainz camp felt there was far too much uncertainty around that programme to go anywhere near it. Williams has no standout short-term competitive argument to make to Sainz over Alpine, and it's not exactly stunning compared to Sauber either. But compared to those two teams, it has a more solid foundation, consistency, and a clear strategy. It was becoming clear that Vowles was confident of landing Sainz as long ago as early June, when his public rhetoric switched from "I don't want to talk about individuals in public" to repeatedly saying Sainz is our number one target. But there have been a crazy amount of twists and turns from that point to Sainz being announced now. It looked like Vowles might come to regret the claim that this was, in his opinion, an easy decision for Sainz to make. That was already pretty bold to begin with. Williams has an underwhelming history for most of the 21st century and would seem to pale in comparison to being the frontman for a manufacturer effort like Audi or even Renault. But it has been broadly on a good trajectory since the Dorilton takeover of 2020, and Vowles, who took charge at the start of last year, has recruited the esteemed Pat Fry as Chief Technical Officer, convinced Alex Albon to commit to a long-term deal, and grown the team to over 1,000 staff members, including a raft of senior signings announced at the end of June. That influx of very capable individuals is a key part of the team's bid to return to the front. It's not about the onus being on any one department or individual to spearhead the turnaround, although in percentage terms there has been a big effort to expand the aero department in particular. It's really about improving in all areas. Vowles has strong support from the board, which is putting its money where its mouth is. He's growing the team and does seem to have genuinely modernised different parts of it in terms of facilities, systems and working culture. It's long been felt that Williams needed to be dragged kicking and screaming into this century in terms of all of those key areas, and Vowles is making more progress in doing that than those before him. He believes Williams is now an entirely different proposition to 3 years ago, and Sainz clearly agrees. It's not been a straightforward process to come to that conclusion, given Sainz has taken his sweet time and other teams have had various developments either strengthening or weakening their cases, but eventually Vowles' honest and transparent campaigning has paid off. So here's the question: has Sainz picked the project he backs most in the long term, or the one he thinks is in the best shape now? Honestly, it feels like a, let's say, 70-30 split. While Williams only has 4 points this season, it's been a lot closer to the main action than Sauber. If you were going to guess what car might be the best in 2025 alone, then it might be Alpine. But frankly, the short-term prospects are fairly bleak across the board. Alpine's made more progress than Williams in season, although we have to say it started from a lower base and it should be doing better given it's a works team, and it had a reasonable run of scoring a small number of points, but 2 dismal weekends in Britain and Hungary made things a little bit more shaky. Williams and Alpine are basically semi-reliable Q2 cars that can sniff at getting into the top 10, which Alpine actually did just before the summer break in the Belgian Grand Prix. Sauber wishes it was that competitive. So if you had to race one car in 2024, it'd almost be a coin flip between Alpine and Williams, but the former would probably get the edge. Then look into next year, Alpine's got a better recent track record of producing competitive cars, but it does now have new technical leadership again, so the jury's out on whether its current position reflects the new order or a low point it will quickly recover from as it has in the past. But we should say Williams has some great low-hanging fruit there for the picking, given its current car is so overweight. The Williams was giving away around 0.4 of a second at the start of the season, putting it around 10 to 15 kilos over the weight limit, and it'll probably take all year, if not a car redesign over the winter, to chip away at all of that. Some progress has been made, but it's a very obvious way of gaining performance when it can finally be done properly. Plus, a lot of Williams' struggles in early 2024 stem from a terrible winter that most likely won't be repeated, as there was a huge overhaul of its systems and design philosophy, so it could make ground quickly in the short term, both over the rest of this season and in 2025. It would be surprising on current form if Williams fails to do better than Sauber next year and maybe even Audi thereafter. The Sauber C44 is lacking in downforce, has sucked the confidence out of Zhou Guanyu, doesn't respond well to bumps, struggles for front end in slow corners and rear instability in the fast corners, and has suffered from a slow development rate. Apart from that, it's a really good car. The bottom line is you'd be really wary about how much progress can be made in the short or even medium term, and what is the future of that team technically, given technical director James Key was hired by his old McLaren boss Seidel. Sainz will almost certainly be better served in Williams colours next year than whatever Sauber's end up being. As for Alpine, while its ceiling should be higher, there are enough reasons to doubt it will deliver on that, and given its longer term appeal is problematic, that's played a role in failing to convince Sainz it was worth the punt too. Williams landing his signature is almost a victory for being simply quite sensible and not over-promising. This is a sensible, stable project that Sainz buys into. He knows what he's getting and sees it as a calculated gamble with an intriguing upside.